So when you're talking to the instos, what are they looking for out of yous before they start moving the needle for you? What's some of the big things you're hearing the most?
So certainly more interested in cash flow. Certainly interested in how we're going to get bigger than 30,000 ounces. Like that is a downside, that 30, just in terms of their investment world, in terms of where they're at. So, you know, in terms of assets within the company, obviously Maldon has the capacity to change that.
This is general advice and my opinions only. CFDs are high risk, past performance isn't reliable. I may be long or short CFDs and stocks mentioned. Content may contain language that offends some viewers. LEVRD operates as corporate authorised representative 001318377 under AFSL 548573. You can find our financial services guide via the LEVRD website link in the show notes. Righto, bag holders and stop loss owners. Another sense check of one of my current holdings. Kaiser Reef, KOU, got the main man, Brad Valiukas on. Mate, how are you? Welcome to LEVRD.
Matt, good. Great to see you.
I like a couple of mining engineers having a crack here, mate. Mate, for the punters, before we get into it, obviously Kaiser's a current holding of mine. I bought it a bit early before the quarterly, but, mate, 30-second overview of the business so people know who we're talking to.
Massive transformation over the last year. Got two really good assets in the business now that we're working on. Henty Gold mine in Tasmania, producing, getting towards 30,000 ounces per annum, and the Maldon Gold project, one of the best exploration opportunities in Victoria. Very
good, mate. Right, well, get through the quarterly first, just quickly. I guess you pre-announced the bit of an underperformance compared to the previous quarter, when you highlighted grade issues and some stuff going forward with controlling the stope grades. Mate, bit of overview. I guess what went wrong? Is it standalone? And I guess what's happening going forward to get those ounces back up?
Yeah, so the first thing I'd say, like, Henty's got a really good footprint, really big footprint at the moment that's all open up for the amount of capital that's been there. So stopes individually for the quarter, certainly standalone, and it's something that will disappear. Look, just not enough effort or not enough work, that process of converting probable to proved reserves, indicators and measured resources before you blow it up. We're just got to come back and we've got to do that better. We missed the grade. We got most of the tons. Some other contributing factors up against the Henty file, a bit of excess dilution and things like that. But ultimately, we just need to tighten up that work before we go between development and stope, and maybe contribution of pushing the production a little bit hard in the past, and certainly pushing the drilling into some of those exploration areas as well.
Yeah. So you said you got the tons, not the dirt. So is that like, are we talking like offline development, or is it just, as you said, was it more a grade? The grade was a bit higher than in the reserve than anticipated when you mined it.
Yeah, so effectively that. So think about like a 3.5 gram grade that was supposed to come out in February and March. We basically got 2.5 for that. So we'll tighten up the processes and make sure we get closer to the mark.
Yeah. So take it. Oh, look, I've never worked in Tasmania. You've obviously worked a lot in WA with your time at Northern Star and everything. What's Tasmania like? We've both worked alongside, the high-paced contractor sort of style in WA, which is bloody go, go, go. I've never worked in Tasmania. What's the setup? What's it like? And is it go, go, go?
So obviously fantastic place in terms of jurisdiction. Tasmania overall, a little bit different. WA, not quite as process driven, but certainly great access to people. A lot of the fundamentals are exactly the same in terms of you need the infrastructure, you need the data out in front of you, and if you've got all that, you've got that bow wave of capital that's out in front, operations can really perform. In terms of the go. Look, I think, we're sort of 75% of, what you'd pick out in WA is really good and high performance. That's probably reflected in our cost structure as well. So there's a bit of give and take there. But I think, putting the holes in the right place, etc., all of that is exactly the same as well. Really strong, consistent residential workforce. I don't see any real downside in that. You just got to... I guess it's just running it slightly different.
Yeah, so cheaper so might be a bit slower than a contractor over here, but cheaper labour.
Yeah, so when it comes down to it, like cost per metre, is the same. In fact, we're very competitive on cost per metre base in Tassie, but we're not going to get the same metres per shift.
Yeah, yep. So Henty, like, it's been around for bloody years, like been around for ages, and numerous owners. Describe the mine to me. Like, how deep we looking? Like, trucking. Like, what's the biggest constraints to getting ounces out? Effectively, are we talking vent, trucking, depth, bloody, like, grade variability? What's the biggest torque to this asset?
Yeah, right now it is our development rates in there in terms of opening up stoping areas quicker, and also that gives us that opportunity for grade control. Look, overall, Henty has been around now for 30 years, hardly outcropped at surface. It's it's a subvertical ore body, as we mine in WA across the board, but the whole plunge is very, very shallow. So things about 5 kilometres long. It's 900 metres deep at the deepest point, and the ore body itself is really only around 300 metres deep. It's sitting in the Mount Reid volcanics. It's lithology-wise, it's not as simple. It's more complicated than we'd see in WA. The first half of the ore body is up close to the Henty Fault, and sort of I don't like, it's not quite the right definition, but sort of smeared along it or dragged along it a bit. So you get some higher grades and you get some narrower stopes there, and part of what we're chasing up around that cradle zone is a little bit similar to that, looking for those higher grades, and then it sort of peels off down the bottom half. Stopes running all the way up to 30 metres wide down there in that Darwin zone, and hence guys like Placer and then Barrick had it as part of their portfolio when mining sort of those at close to 9 grams historically. It was fantastic. Like, clearly we're not there at those grades anymore. A lot of Henty is a combination of remnant and extensional material, and that's my comment, that we have so many working areas available and there's so much capital in this place already. It's really just opening up those working areas, and some of those are straight development and some of those are rehab. Yeah.
And what is there? What backfill is it? Backfill or is it pillars? How's the stoping work?
So it's historically a combination of paste and loose backfill. We've started putting some CRF in some stopes, and not started, but it happens occasionally there. But most of it's loose backfill at the moment going in. But certainly backfill is a requirement.
Yeah, and if you're down at 900 metres and a lot of old workings, how's the ground behaving? What's the ground conditions like over there?
Down the bottom there, the ground's actually is really good, and it's actually pretty forgiving. It's quite high. Like, we don't have the in-situ stress like we have here in WA. So 900 metres feels very shallow. The rock conditions are pretty good. You can open up a void that's 30 by 30 by 30, and it holds together pretty well. And sometimes with another stope on top of it, things like that. Obviously, you don't want to leave that open for forever, and got to get in and backfill as overall. Up the top half of the mine, where we get closer to the Henty Fault, that's where the ground conditions get a bit tougher. Some semi-oxidized material in some structures, as well as just in the Henty Fault itself. If we break that, some very, very weak ground there, and that did contribute to the last quarter. A couple of high grade stopes there where we broke that probably shouldn't have, just basic mining stuff that we probably could have done a little bit better, and a little bit of high grade sweetener at the end just didn't come through.
Yeah, and so on it, the mill, it's pretty, it's small scale, 300,000 tonne per annum, and you're talking about going lifting to the 350, 400. What's involved in that? Is there can that be done without capital? Is there just some mill bottlenecks that can be removed? How's that throughput going to go up? And do you have the dirt to feed it as well?
Yeah, so I'll answer the dirt feed it later. We've done a fair bit on the back half of the mill, so things like the detox circuit on there, we've already doubled the capacity through there. Henty has run for 30 years with nothing but a mobile jaw crusher on the surface, feeding direct to the SAG mill. So where we've run up at that increased capacity, we've made all those little debottlenecking changes in the back half, and we've also changed, cyclone configuration, the amount of water running through. We've decreased the residence time, but the leaching's improved because we're running a little bit more water through there. So leach kinetics have improved. So we've been able to run there just by putting a second crusher on the surface and running a screen and a cone crusher. We've demobbed that at the moment. We've got approvals all through now and just about to commence a ROM pad expansion there at Henty to replace the mobile crushers with a full fixed, semi-modular style setup, looking at sort of 8 to 10, but that would pay itself back pretty quick. Yeah. 8 to 10 mil in terms of capital spend. So that's all that's really outstanding there at the moment. And if we do that, we'll end up going to 3-stage, and so just really reducing the feed size before it goes to the SAG.
Yeah, yeah, and the feed, like, you're pretty confident on getting an extra 100,000 tonne a year to feed an expanded mill. It's funny talking about expanding a mill from 300 to 400,000 tonne, but is much of a bottleneck mining versus milling?
No, so really it's just that development rate and opening up some of those stoping areas a bit quicker. Development rates have picked up. Second half of last quarter, we started doing some really basic stuff like some time in motion studies, and you just start collapsing the wasted time through the system. So, development rates are picking up. We've gone from running, 10, 15% below where we wanted to be to suddenly being 20% above targets, like where we say we need to be. So, yeah, I'm pretty comfortable that we can do that. We've got a little bit of swap out right now for just on trucks, and so we've let one go and don't have another truck coming in to replace it until right at the end of quarter. So we've probably got a little bit of waste and stuff building up underground at the moment, but that'll disappear. So certainly that 30,000 target, next financial year, I'm happy with, and that 35,000 target is all about basically maintaining the same grade running through, and then just increasing the tonnes.
Yeah, so I assume a bit of the waste building up underground is you'd be using for your backfill, for CRF. Like, is there a good portion not coming to the surface?
Yeah, there's heaps that doesn't go to the surface. So there's no waste dump historically on the surface at Henty. And so when we talk about some of the rehab, there is some waste to clear out of that. All the potentially acid forming stuff, the PAF stays underground and gets used. All the NAF, non-acid forming, gets brought to surface, gets used in Tailings Dam construction. So we'd actually like a little bit more of that. So the balance works out okay. There's just always a little bit more physical movement to do than you'd like. Really good conversation with some parties in recent times. There's some work we're doing in terms of being able to use some PAF in that Tailings Dam construction. That would be a massive change to the project overall.
Yeah, and that was the next part I wanted to go on to is the Tailings Dam, I think, because you said you're on lifts 11 and 12. Explain, once you're up high, how high is it getting? How high can that tailings dam go? And I guess the cost per lift and the volume per lift decreases due to the bloody arching shape of a tailings dam. What's happening with the tailings dam long term for that not to become an issue?
Yeah, so we've got 3 things going on in parallel at the moment. So we're doing lift 11 construction, lift 12, just find a bit of permitting going from there, and there's always the construction permit as you go along. There's a big area to the side which is already disturbed. It's been borrow pit area from when Tailings Dam was originally constructed. We're doing a little bit more geotech work there not long ago, so that's all going through the construction phase. That takes us out for our reserve, and then plus like another 2 years after that. And then on top of that, we have started the process of looking for sort of like a further 10-year life of mine. I say life of mine, it'll always be something more than that, but another 10-year deposit location after that. So we've got a few things that we're all working on in parallel, but certainly no stress, no complaints about our reserve capacity, and then we need to keep going. And I think Tasmania is a very supportive jurisdiction for mining. 65% of the state's export income comes from mines and minerals, and we plan to continue being part of that. Yeah.
So if we're talking that sort of length, we're talking 10 years, which is hard for a gold mine. Not many have got 10 years in front of them. What's your plans versus what's previously been done at Henty? Has it been under drilled? Like, is there plenty of organic opportunity that you're going to test? Like, how much are you going to be putting towards the long term here?
Yeah, so we've got the second drill rig back in underground, ideally. So we've got one floating around doing more grade control work and one doing exploration work. Cradle zone over at the top of the mine at the moment is the biggest opportunity in mine. We've got a rig up there drilling at the moment. We've done the drill drive extension to get in front of it and get a decent drill platform. So that's all now been completed. We've got a rig parked up there now. No assays back as we speak. Some stuff that looks okay from visual indications, but like Henty does have a base metals footprint associated with it, and you get alteration. It doesn't necessarily mean there's any gold there, but looks as good as you'd hope at the moment. Extensionally beyond that mine footprint, it's been constrained in this area now for a long time. Basically from where it outcrops down to a thing at the bottom called the Tearaway Fault. And, there's a couple of holes drilled past that, and Catalyst drilled a couple of holes that, looked okay visually and had some alteration in it, but didn't really come back with much gold or base metals. But then as soon as you step away north and south, there's a plethora of old surface workings, both gold and base metals, and then we've got half the strike all the way down. So we've committed to, we're recruiting right now for a senior exploration GA to come into the mix. So we give that beyond the mine footprint the love it deserves. No different to what we're doing at Maldon right now in terms of getting all our ducks in a row before we hit it too hard. So that's going on at the moment, and we will spend $250 a month, keep a rig running most of the time, one way or another, either doing some really long holes from underground or some work from surface.
Yeah, right. On to Victoria, mate. Which was Kaiser Reef was A1, the A1 gold mine. And correct me if I'm wrong. That's sort of dead in the water. Like A1's had its day.
Look, I think for Kaiser Reef it has. Certainly there's a couple of parties we're talking to, about potential divestment. We've got some stuff to sort out internally, or with RV Resources Victoria as well, just in terms of final work plan variations that include rehab and things like that. So the old 23 level down there, so that the grade dropped away, and the drilling underneath that. So a lot of expectation, and I came in on that expectation that the ore body would continue beyond that. It's been going for 160 years. So then when we got down there, there's a change in nature of the mineralisation and the drilling below us.
God, half your luck, eh?
You hit plenty of structure, right? And A1 traditionally, right, you can get great grade or you can get nothing. Like structure is so important. And then, right, we get down the bottom, we have a look at it, something's not quite working out down here, and then beyond that, it also gets to the point where the weight of drilling, despite the fact that you're hitting structure, becomes a problem. So, I had to make those tough decisions. I think there's some opportunity there. Top half of the mine's never been done for remnant. Kaiser won't go back in and do the remnants. In terms of overall exploration, like there's a couple of Ks on that mining lease of dikes and surface workings running north to south, and we've mined this portion that's about 300 metres. South shaft is still links to the main mine, but effectively it's still a little bit to the south of what we did. So there's still some fairly decent opportunity there. Bushfire went through not long ago, about a month ago, and took out a heap of the vegetation. Didn't do too much damage to site, which was good, but we took the opportunity to do a really good LiDAR survey, and popped up out of that. There's an entire second line of surface workings running in a whole parallel, equivalent dike position. So I think exploration wise, there's still quite a lot of potential there. It's probably not our focus.
Yeah. Okay. So Maldon, put out a bit of a update yesterday, I think it was. It was yesterday with the the drill rig heading down the decline, and then permitting for your second exploration play. Like Maldon, first off, just explain, because you got the processing plant going there. Just explain Maldon for us very briefly and where that is in relation to the old A1.
Right, so Maldon is 350 k's away from A1, so it's a long way from A1. A1's south of Mansfield and the high country of Victoria. Maldon is sort of town, almost the next town south of Bendigo. So like miles away, we were hauling ore a long way through Victoria from A1 for those small quantities across to Maldon. So we're sitting there with a pretty decent exploration footprint. We've got an existing mining lease that's, you know, about 5 kilometres long, about 2 kilometres wide. There's 5 main lines of load that run through that mining lease. They basically go completely from north to south along that. 1.75 million ounces has been mined out of Maldon from Quartz Reef. There's another, you know, reported 300,000 ounces of alluvial mined over the top of it, off the top of that as well, historically, which is why it was important to actually do some sterilisation drilling around the Tailings Dam. So, you know, and just massive expanses there that have never been touched or never been tested. And there's not too many drill holes in Maldon that miss anything. So I think certainly there's an opportunity there to, you know, not go too far from replicating what's been mined in the past. Maybe not at the grade, you know, we'd be bigger gear and pushing productivity a bit higher. But certainly in terms of ounces, I think there's huge opportunity there. In terms of what's going on there at the moment, you know, we've got this massive spread from target generation through to a process plant that's operating and producing gold at the moment. We took a step back at the end of last year and said that, right, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it properly all the way through. So one of the things to get out of hopefully yesterday's announcement is, you know, we're back to doing soil samples. We've got airborne geophysics to, you know, chopper to get the resolution going on through there to map structures. We've got work going on from surface to map old workings through there. So we're trying to do all of that background work while at the same time, you know, we have a operating process plant and a fully permitted mine that's on care and maintenance. 3 kilometre long decline down to the bottom of that. It remains fully dewatered. We supply like 17 farmers in the district. In terms of water going off site, like we've got no issues in terms of what we're doing there. And yeah, we've committed to starting the rehab primarily for exploration. New exploration platform at the north. We've got high grades sitting on the Eaglehawk Reef that just need drilling underneath. We've got Ladies Reef structure sitting off on the other side that just had no data whatsoever, even though there's an ounce intersection sitting there and just not tested to the north. So great position, and then we'll just keep ticking away at that, and it won't take us too long before we're also doing some exploration development on, you know, on mineralised structure. I don't want to say, you know, all without the reserve, etc. Try and cage that the right way.
Material.
Potential ore bore, you know, but if we've done the drilling and, you know, some cover and we've got enough information and we're happy there's no voids there, it's pretty easy to step across and start doing some of that. Late last year, we put out some numbers that were pretty decent from the pit, which is really drilling into waste that got left behind before, you know, sort of 4 intersections out of that. There's sort of 6 metres at 6 grams equivalent type numbers. So yeah, it won't take much to start generating some extra feed there. And I think the gaps in the pipeline between this, you know, target gen all the way through to production, like there's some big gaps there in terms of the way a pipeline would normally flow. Like I think we'll just see those start to compress, and it'll sort of transition back to what we'd consider production. Doesn't take away from, you know, our priorities certainly there is get the infrastructure right, and which is what we're doing. You know, we're going to come back, we're going to do some stripping in the deep. We could have just done the rehab, but we are going to do the stripping. We are going to do the takeoffs for other positions as we go down. We're actually going to pull the steel sets out and take another sort of 0.5 metre all around that decline profile as well, just so we can run at least 45 trucks life of mine running through there. So we're doing that all the way through. We'll set up the positions for exploration. We'll do the exploration. And, you know, again, we get that bow wave of data out in front of us, like the ability to then ramp up development and production within that envelope is pretty good. And there's heaps of guys in Victoria that are keen to come work there.
Yeah. So give us a rough Gantt chart on the rehab and to when you're going to be drilling to when potential results coming through.
Yeah, so first week May we'll start on the physical rehab. Like there's been a lot of work done already. You know how much it takes to set up a mine, right? So everything from, you know, regulator engagement to power to site and everything that goes between it, right? So you know, all of that's coming to conclusion. So first week of May, we'll be down there starting to rehab and try and say refurbish rather than just rehab, because we're, going to run new power down there and new services and the whole lot's going down through there. So I've allowed 2 weeks to get from the portal. And like I said, we're going to pull the steel sets out of there as well and just trim that up. There's pretty good mining suppliers. So you've got guys like Pancala out of Bendigo doing Shotcrete and things like that. So that'll all run pretty smooth. 2 months, we'll have first drill platform set up off to the north there, and hopefully rig in pretty much straight after that. And even that takeoff to the north, right? We're setting that up as a future trucking takeoff. It's not just the drill cuddy, but set up because we've got kilometres of prospective structure to the north of us, which I can see all being accessed from that position.
Yeah. Okay. So that drilling should line up with diggers, hopefully.
Drilling should be lining up with diggers. Would be, depending on how we go, I might even be close to first results, probably just after.
Yeah. Oh, wouldn't it be convenient if you had it by then? Right. No, interesting. So is Maldon? Because I'm trying to. I've had a punt on you, obviously, and you said on your deck cheapest EV per production ounce, and I assume you're getting pretty much bugger all value for Maldon. Like, what are people missing, I guess? I'm not catching a falling knife here, hopefully. But is Maldon a bit of a free carried interest in this?
Yeah, I think so, absolutely. Right. So even if you look at, we had a miss at Henty for the last quarter, but there's still some decent free cash flow across the business in that. If you look at what we paid back in the debt and everything as well, so it's not it was terrible, and obviously we need to make changes, and we are making changes as part of that. But still, we're still a profitable operation, right? And all the work we've said we've done at Maldon, right? We did all of that out of that cash flow, right? And including still putting the money in the bank. So yeah, Maldon very much is a free carried interest. When we talk to funds and bigger guys, it's all about Henty and free cash flow, and what's the next driver. We speak to average retail guys, they get more excited about Maldon, but unfortunately aren't quite there to move the needle. There's guys in Victoria with exploration projects that I don't think are as good as Maldon, and market caps are sort of at least half of what ours is. I think that a couple of decent holes there, and people wake up to what that potential is. And we've got to do the work, we've got to show it, we've got to demonstrate it, and hence why we're doing all the work to do it properly. I think that'll turn around pretty quick. I'd like to think Maldon will turn around pretty quick.
Yeah. So when you're talking to the instos, what are they looking for out of yous before they start moving the needle for you? What's some of the big things you're hearing the most? Good question, because most of it, comes across pretty well. So certainly more interested in cash flow. Certainly interested in how we're going to get bigger than 30,000 ounces. That is a downside, that 30, just in terms of their investment world, in terms of where they're at. In terms of assets within the company, obviously Maldon has the capacity to change that dramatically. Just ounces and free cash flow is what it's about for those guys. Yeah. So obviously you've got Henty out of Catalyst. Catalyst have got 20% of you. So are they involved at all? Just passive from the transaction?
Pretty passive at the moment there. I think, they'd certainly like to see us grow the business as a whole, including, M&A, and James certainly recognises that, 30,000 ounce producer is, we want to be bigger. We want to be bigger than that, and we should be pulling out all stops to do that. And so we're certainly busy in the background, despite what we're doing on sites. There's still plenty of things to be out there and be active on. But otherwise, in terms of, operations, pretty passive.
Yeah, too easy, mate. We'll wrap it up in a tick. Have I missed anything that you wanted to get across the board? This is your chance.
Look, the last thing is, I'd say, our aim for Henty is actually about 35,000 ounces, and we maintain the grade and just open it up and get that processing going. Our costs are very, very fixed at Henty. those additional ounces make a big difference to what our all-in sustaining cost is on a per ounce basis. So we've got to keep working towards that at the same time.
Yeah, too easy, mate. Well, best of luck over there. Hope everyone stays safe, and be good to look forward to the next quarter. Appreciate you coming on, LEVRD. Legend.
Thanks, mate.
And as always, punters, thanks to the DOSH sponsor, the Toad, the Canetoad. Link in the show notes to the 3D drill hole visualising software that will change your life. Thank you very much.